The hood had its own rules, unspoken, invisible, but firm like the iron bars of a prison. Everyone knew it. Those who didn't either learned fast or didn't last long. At the top of this unspoken hierarchy stood Jamal, or as everyone called him, Lil Bad. His name was like a curse whispered on the wind, a warning. It wasn't because he carried a gun or ran with a crew. No, Jamal's power ran deeper than that. It was in his eyes, in the way he moved, in the way people feared him before they even met him. The older folks in the neighborhood would tell you stories, but no one ever dared challenge the truth. He didn't just control the streets, he controlled fate itself. It was a sweltering summer evening when a young upstart named Dre decided he was ready to make his mark. Dre had grown up in the same hood, ran with the same guys, but there was something about him that made him feel different. He wasn't content just being a part of the crew. He wanted more. He wanted respect. And to get that respect, he knew he had to take down the top dog. Dre had heard all the stories about Lil Bad, but he wasn't afraid. No, Dre thought the legends were just that. Stories. In his mind, Jamal was just another man, no different from anyone else in the hood. The man needed to be humbled. On this particular night, Dre made up his mind. He wasn't going to just challenge Jamal, he was going to break him. He knew where Lil Bad hung out, on the corner of 12th and Pine, by the old bodega, sitting on the hood of his black Impala, eyes hidden behind dark shades, cool as ice. So Dre walked up to him, chest puffed out like a rooster, ignoring the looks from the onlookers. The tension in the air was thick, but Dre didn't care. He had a reputation to build. He squared off with Jamal, standing a little too close for comfort, his eyes never leaving Jamal's face. "Yo, you Lil Bad, huh?" Dre said, trying to sound casual, but his voice wavered just a bit. He threw a cocky smile, hoping it would hide the growing uncertainty inside him. Jamal didn't respond right away. He just took a long drag from his cigarette, letting the smoke coil around his face like a cloud of mystery. For a long moment, it seemed like he wasn't even aware Dre was there. But then, when Jamal finally looked up, the air grew colder, heavier. There was a look in his eyes, something ancient, something nobody in the hood had ever been able to describe. "Yeah, that's me," Jamal replied, his voice so low, it almost didn't register at first. "You got a problem?" Dre laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Nah, I just want to know if the stories are true. They say you the king around here. Well, I'm here to see if that's for real. You don't scare me." Jamal smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reassured people. It was a smile that made you feel like you were already in the grip of something you couldn't escape. "You should be scared," Jamal said, his voice like the quiet before a storm. "Because when you cross me, it's not just about you. It's about everything you build, everything you think you have. I don't forget, and I don't forgive. Remember that." Dre stepped back, thinking it was just a warning, a scare tactic. He wasn't backing down, not now. "Ain't nobody scared of you, fam." Jamal didn't even flinch. He stood up, towering over Dre by a few inches, his presence swallowing the space around them. "You're about to learn something you'll never forget. Step carefully." Dre turned his back, not willing to show any weakness. He thought about what he could do next, how he could push Lil Bad into a corner and prove he wasn't afraid. But as he walked away, the streets seemed to whisper. The usual chatter, the sounds of kids playing, and the distant hum of cars all seemed to fade. The city, once familiar, now felt foreign, colder. Days passed and Dre began to notice things slipping. First, his crew started to act distant, not responding to his calls, not hanging out the way they used to. Then the guys who once looked up to him began to avoid eye contact. It was subtle at first, small things, but Dre couldn't ignore it. Something was off. He was on the block one night, talking to a few of his guys when a car pulled up, a sleek black Impala. The engine cut off, and the moment the door opened, Dre felt a chill crawl up his spine. He didn't have to turn around to know who it was. He just knew. Lil Bad stepped out of the car, slow, like time itself was moving in sync with his every step. Dre tried to keep his composure, but his palms were sweating. His heart raced. The crowd around them grew silent. Jamal didn't say a word. He just stood there, eyes locked onto Dre's, his gaze unblinking. "What's up, Dre?" Jamal's voice was low but carried in the air, like it echoed off the buildings. "I've been hearing things. Dre's throat went dry. What? What are you talking about? His words came out shaky, a stark contrast to the bravado he had shown just days before. I heard you're trying to be somebody, Jamal said, taking a slow step forward. But this world, this game, it doesn't work like that. You don't get to just take respect. You earn it. And crossing me? Well, that's a mistake you don't get to walk away from. The words hit Dre like a slap to the face. He looked around at the people in the street, their faces painted with fear. No one was saying anything, but everyone was watching, waiting, knowing what was coming next. Before Dre could say another word, Jamal raised his hand, silencing him. The street don't forget, little man. It remembers every move you make. And the thing about me? Jamal leaned in, his breath cool against Dre's ear. I'm not just the streets. I am the streets. The tension in the air grew unbearable. The crowd backed away slowly, like they had seen this scene play out before, and they knew what was coming. But Dre was too proud, too full of himself to back down. He opened his mouth ready to retort, but before the words could leave his lips, something unexpected happened. The ground beneath his feet seemed to shift. The streetlights flickered out, and then it was as if the air itself turned to ice. Dre's knees buckled, and the world around him began to spin. His vision blurred. His body felt weak, like all the strength had drained from his limbs. He could hear Jamal's voice, but it sounded far away, echoing in his head. Remember me next time, Dre, and remember the lesson. Some names are better left unchallenged. When Dre finally came to, the world around him was eerily still. His crew was gone. His friends, those who had once looked up to him, were nowhere to be found. The next day, the hood whispered his name, but not with the same respect it once had. Dre had vanished, gone. Not even a trace was left behind. It was as though the street had swallowed him whole. To this day, they still talk about what happened to Dre. Some say he ran off, but those who know the streets know better. They know that crossing a bad boy in the hood comes with a price, and sometimes that price is your very existence.